is one of the highlights of their stay. In addition to visiting their daughter who works in London, the shop is what we came for, says Mrs. Robertson, as her husband clutches a bag bulging with polo shirts and trainers. Their surprising enthusiasm is widely shared. Sports Direct is hugely successful. Between 2009 and 2014, the sportswear market in Britain grew only slightly in value. Yet over the same period, the revenue of Sports Direct, boosted by acquisitions, increased by around 40% to £2.2 billion. That's $3.6 billion. Small wonder the firm's idiosyncratic founder and Deputy Executive Chairman Mike Ashley succeeded on July 2nd in securing a fat bonus for himself and around 3,000 eligible employees, albeit at the third time of asking and after a testy standoff with shareholders. Sports Direct's success is all the more remarkable in view of the devastation that has occurred elsewhere in British retailing. Around 14% of retail lots are estimated to be vacant, according to the local data company, a research firm. Yet Sports Direct has thrived, not least by taking the measure of the times with relentless discounting. Signs boasting mega deals hang throughout its shops, which often resemble jumble sales. Lillywhites, a retailer acquired by Sports Direct in 2002, used to be a posh London department store stocked with the finest sporting goods. Now it is pile it high, sell it cheap, sniffs Matthew Hopkinson, an analyst. Another ingredient of Sports Direct's success is that it makes much of what it sells under a variety of brands. Like Lillywhites, these tend to be tired but venerable names, such as Lonsdale and Dunlop, which have been revived through clever marketing. This allows Sports Direct to keep prices low but margins high. And unlike JJB Sports, parts of which the company bought after it entered administration in 2012, the chain is generally cannier about negotiating store leases too. Unprofitable stores are shut down swiftly. The group's remarkably lean supply chain is another advantage. Rather than use third-party firms, Sports Direct tends to look after most of its logistics itself, says Dave Forsey, the group's chief executive. This cuts down costs, reducing the number of hands goods pass through, and it helps boost online sales, which are growing. Behind nearly all of this is Mr. Ashley, who founded the business with a £10,000 loan in 1982. Also the owner of Newcastle United Football Club, he has a far higher public profile than most company founders. A video on YouTube which appears to show him drinking a pint of beer in less than a minute has been watched nearly 90,000 times. Analysts adore him. He's a genius. Coups won. Yet some doubt that the good times can continue, particularly if Mr. Ashley were to take a step back from the business. As the economy recovers, it will become harder to find good deals on retail sites, says Matt Pinner of Conlumino, a consultancy. This may mean that any further expansion will have to be outside Britain. But the firm also seems to be betting on a move away from its cheap and cheerful roots. It is sprucing up its shops, and later this year will be opening a series of concessions in Debenhams, a chain of department stores. The new flagship shop on Oxford Street in London is large and sleek and sells brogues and more expensive t-shirts alongside tracksuits. This may attract new customers, which would be a better option than just trying to squeeze more cash out of existing ones. But it also brings the company into ever greater competition with big general fashion retailers. Unless it can keep down prices as it moves into this new market, loyal fans such as the Robertsons may become rarer. Britain. African Pentecostalism. The power of prayer. African churches are leaving a mark on British Christianity.
We believe in you for better jobs, raises and bonuses, finding money, money finding us, incomes, royalties, real estates, dividends, inheritances. We pray to Jesus and there shall be a turnaround. So ends the service at the Walthamstow branch of the Kingsway International Christian Centre, or KICC. Dancers in long white skirts carrying red umbrellas leap onto the stage. Perhaps 1,000 smartly dressed worshippers chant along while ushers collect hefty tithes. Between 2008 and 2013, the membership of Pentecostal churches grew by 25% to 430,000, reckons Peter Brierley, who tracks church attendance. Not all are West African. Brazilian Pentecostal churches are also buzzing, and not all West African churches are Pentecostal. But African churches of all sorts do seem to be thriving, whether as materialistic as the KICC or more traditional in their gospel. They are all entrepreneurial. Increasingly they are reaching out to suburbs and to whites as well. The Redeemed Christian Church of God, or RCCG, a particularly successful Nigerian organisation, now has 670 churches in Britain, including branches in Basingstoke and Guildford. The KICC was based in Hackney, but when it lost its building to the 2012 London Olympics, it opened a new mega-church near Chatham, a poorish part of Kent. Some preachers see themselves as reverse missionaries, bringing back Christianity to Britain, suggests Babatunde Abedibu, the RCCG's chief policy officer in Britain. They set up new branches of churches and relentlessly seek converts. To get them, RCCG churches are increasingly doing the sorts of things Anglican churches do, running food banks, creches and Sunday schools. And African churches may be encouraging change in Anglican ones. Under the current Archbishop of York, John Sentamu, it is not unusual to see full outdoor adult baptisms, notes David Goodhue of Durham University. That is perfectly compatible with Anglican theology, but also rather new. He thinks happy, clappy, charismatic worship is also becoming more common, even in some quite fuddy-duddy churches. Some Africans now go to 2 services each Sunday, one Pentecostal, one Anglican. The most popular churches are those that run good primary schools.
Britain. Budget. In the ring with Chuka Obama. As Labour Party leaders jockey for position, the shadow business secretary is one to watch.
Chuka Amuna had an especially packed inbox this past week. Some of his correspondents called the Labour MP for Streatham a spear chucker. Get it? Others invited the mixed-race grandson of a High Court judge to go home. They took exception to Mr. Amuna's recent observation that 1 in 5 Britons cannot do basic tasks online, and that such digital castaways are likely to vote for the UK Independence Party, UKIP. It is surprising what some racist scumbags take exception to. Perhaps what they really minded was Mr. Amuna's broader point, which is that improving education and economic opportunity are a better response to the xenophobia fueling UKIP's rise than pandering to it. Some of his party colleagues think Labour needs a tougher line on immigration to stanch its losses to UKIP. Mr. Amuna, the son of a poor, made-good Nigerian immigrant and MP for one of Britain's most diverse places, says that is rubbish. It would be counterproductive, illogical, and it's not the party we are, he says, showing the passion that some of his many admirers fear he might lack. For a 35-year-old who entered Parliament only 4 years ago, the Shadow Business Secretary's strengths are well recognised. He is handsome, charming, and a superb communicator. In a time of reviled politicians, people actually like listening to him. As Mr. Amuna went about his constituency duties one recent morning, it was striking how many people, men and women, and all rather giggly, wanted to be photographed with their MP. The contrast with Labour's leader, Ed Miliband, a body-awkward wonk, is exciting rueful comment. Because Mr. Miliband is having such a dreadful time, prone to weekly gaffes, execrable personal ratings and hostile briefings from within his kitchen cabinet, Labour minds are naturally turning to the next leadership contest. If Mr. Miliband fails to win next year's general election, the current mood in the party suggests he will face a challenge. There will be no rerun of Neil Kinnock's serial losses. Ed Balls, the shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, is plainly on manoeuvres, courting the unions and local associations, but not on his own behalf. Rambunctious and divisive, he appears to be campaigning for his wife, the enigmatic Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. Andy Burnham, the Shadow Health Secretary, and like Mr. Balls, a loser to Mr. Miliband last time round, is also spending a lot of time with the unions, in the euphemistic phrase of another Labour front bencher. Mr. Amuna is taking no such steps, which is wise. His precocity has already left him vulnerable to accusations of pushiness, yet it is clear that the putative contest would pit the older guard, probably led by Ms. Cooper, against at least one star of Labour's gifted 2010 parliamentary intake, among whom Mr. Amuna shines brightest. A recent poll made Mr. Amuna the favourite to succeed Mr. Miliband, with 70% saying they would consider voting for him, followed by 67% for Ms. Cooper. Such a choice would be largely a matter of taste. None of the expected contenders would be likely to abandon the new Labour centrism against which Mr. Miliband is rather painfully kicking. But style can be important, not least because, as leader, Mr. Amuna or either of his similarly well-regarded peers on the Labour front bench, Tristram Hunt and Rachel Reeves, would signal an end to the feuding that has long blighted the party. Mr. Miliband has done well to draw the poison. Victory for Mr. Balls, a former enforcer for Gordon Brown, would replenish it. By contrast, Mr. Amuna and the other 2010ers are untainted and unstirred by the tempers that the respective legacies of Mr. Brown and his predecessor as Labour Prime Minister, Tony Blair, arouse. They are also friends. Mr. Amuna would not allow Mr. Hunt to call him Chuka Obama otherwise. If Mr. Miliband's hopes of remaking British capitalism are receding, the Labour leader may at least be imbuing his party with some of his own decency. Perhaps the solidarity among Mr. Amuna, Mr. Hunt and Ms. Reeves could turn into something more solid, because they are better placed than their more gnarled colleagues to answer the question which will dominate Labour for years: what should the left do when money is tight? That Mr. Miliband has failed to answer it is not only a presentational issue. It is because when he was in government there was plenty of money around, and he seems unable to register how dire Britain's public finances are. Mr. Balls has the same problem. Mr. Amuna and his peers, having cut their teeth in austerity, have not. Asked how his politics have changed, Mr. Amuna says he has become far more hawkish on spending. Partly as a response to that, he also notes that he and his contemporaries are keen on decentralising power, not least because they see it as necessary to drive growth. Though maybe, he joshes, that's because none of us has been in government, so we don't know what it feels like to give power away. Mr. Amuna is an appealing politician, but his inexperience could be a problem. Critics in Labour ask what, beneath the polish, he truly thinks. In conversation he gives clues, but no wholly satisfying answer to that. He is clever and able to marshal the right arguments on many topics, but push him and he can sound less assured. He wants the government to be active, but not interventionist in the economy. But what's the difference? He finds the question of state ownership at once important and overplayed. The impression is of a quick-witted and fair-minded pragmatist, still settling on his core opinions. That is no slur, but Mr. Amuna has been so exposed at such a tender stage in his career suggests quite how far he stands above most of his colleagues on the Labour front bench. And he has earned the plaudits this exposure has brought him. The question is whether, if Mr. Miliband crashes and burns next year, Mr. Amuna will be ready.
International.
The Economist, July 5th to July 11th, 2014. In the international section, revenge porn, misery merchants, and austerity and healthcare laying down the scalpel.
International. Misery merchants. How should the online publication of explicit images without their subject's consent be punished?
He said he would destroy me, says Anne-Marie Chiarini, a lecturer from Maryland. In 2011, after a bitter breakup, her ex-boyfriend uploaded dozens of photos of her naked to a porn website, along with her contact details and the name of the school where she works. That made her one of a growing number of victims of revenge porn, the non-consensual publication online of explicit images, often by an ex-boyfriend seeking to wound. Ubiquitous smartphones and cheap data packages mean such intimacies are easier to share than they used to be, and more often betrayed after a relationship is ended. At least 3,000 porn websites around the world feature the revenge genre, and the number is rising, says John DiGiacomo of Revision Legal, a Michigan-based law firm. Women's charities in Britain and America say more victims are contacting them for help all the time. Men are occasionally targeted too. In Japan, the number of cases reported to police more than tripled to 27,334 between 2008 and 2012. The consequences for the unwitting subjects can be severe, including damage to their future relationships and careers. Ms. Chiarini was harassed online. Others have had abusive strangers turn up at their doors. In the past couple of years, several are known to have killed themselves. Yet victims often find themselves without legal recourse. Many countries have laws against harassment or malicious communication, but these generally target repeated actions, direct contacts, and verbal or physical threats. Copyright law cannot help if the person who publishes an image also took it. Even if it was snapped by the subject, one survey suggests that such selfies make up a large share of all revenge porn, getting it taken down is slow and costly, and during the delay it may be republished elsewhere. If images were stolen or obtained by subterfuge, a victim may have some redress. In February, a jury in Texas awarded $500,000 to a woman whose ex-boyfriend posted a pornographic video he recorded during a Skype call. But few victims bring such cases. Costs can reach $100,000, and legal proceedings will draw unwanted attention to the images. And most countries absolve websites that host user-generated material of legal responsibility for it. Child pornography is usually an exception. After basically begging a site to remove images of herself, Becca Wells, a Florida student, found her written appeal and photos featured on its homepage. Laws against child pornography and hacking can sometimes be pressed into service. In March, a court in Ohio awarded a client of Mark Randazza, a lawyer in Las Vegas, damages of $385,000 against Kevin Bolette, a Californian, since the client was under 18 in photos featured on his site, You Got Posted. Also facing prosecution and possible jail time is Hunter Moore, who the FBI claims paid a hacker to source images for his now defunct site, Is Anyone Up? Mr. Bolette also faces prosecution for extortion, which could lead to years in jail. He is charged with having made tens of thousands of dollars from another site, Change My Reputation, which would contact You Got Posted's victims to alert them to the publication of their images and offer to get them removed for $300 or more. Klein Investigations and Consulting, a Texan firm, says that since the beginning of last year, it has found 7 American sites that offer to remove content if the subject pays. All have since closed in the face of litigation or prosecution. It has also sent evidence to Interpol relating to 8 similar operations based elsewhere. But site owners can still make money if they are careful by running paid ads for arbitration or reputation management firms that negotiate with sites on behalf of victims. According to Mr. Randazza, if customers can choose between several firms that are independent of the site publishing the images and do not guarantee results, extortion charges are unlikely to stick. As lawmakers and politicians around the world wake up to the spread of revenge porn, more are trying to craft laws against it. Israel has gone furthest. In January, the Knesset voted unanimously to make posting intimate images without the subject's agreement count as sexual harassment, punishable by up to 5 years in jail. Previously, such actions were regarded as mere violations of privacy. Police rarely investigated, let alone sought to prosecute. The new law has changed attitudes, says Yifat Kariv, who sponsored it in the Knesset. But establishing beyond doubt who first disseminated an image is hard. An ex-boyfriend may claim, for example, that the images were stolen when his computer was hacked. In the past 4 months, Israeli police have opened files on 55 cases, 37 of which are still being investigated. So far, just one has led to an indictment. Britain is also planning revenge porn laws. Chris Grayling, the Justice Secretary, told Parliament on July 1st that the government may include them in a criminal justice bill planned for the autumn. Julian Huppert, a Liberal Democrat MP who campaigns on the issue, thinks that even if prosecution is rare, the mere possibility will act as a deterrent. Many of those who post revenge porn are quite open about it, he points out. They think it's funny. New law is being shaped in Germany too. In May, a court in Koblenz ordered a man who possessed erotic photos and videos of his ex-girlfriend to delete the most explicit ones on her request, though they had been shot with her permission and he had neither shared them nor threatened to do so. The potential for harm